Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 3. Episode 13 today, we journey into the emotional aftermath of trauma and explore how emotional intelligence offers a path to healing. We've pulled together an incredible stack of sources for this deep dive, from comprehensive studies on PTSD to the pioneering work of figures like Daniel Goleman and Dr. Judith Lewis Herman. Our mission is to really unpack the profound ways trauma imprints on our emotional brain, and then crucially to illuminate the pathways to relearning and recovery, revealing just how much control we might actually have over our emotional responses. What if the very parts of our brain that seem, broken by trauma are also the key to unlocking profound healing and resilience? That's the journey we're embarking on today, and we think you'll find some powerful insights for your own life. To truly grasp the visceral impact of trauma, we need to start with a vivid example. Imagine this scene at Cleveland Elementary School in Stockton, California, back on February 17, 1989. A gunman opened fire during recess, leaving 5 children dead and many more wounded. Our sources detail the chilling aftermath, where children spontaneously played this macabre prank called Purdy, actually reenacting the massacre. And the reactions weren't limited to just reenactment. What followed was, equally disturbing. Teachers reported this wave of fright with the announcement of St. Patrick's Day, as children genuinely believed it honored the killer, Patrick Purdy.
Wow.
Yeah. Ambulance sirens, mirrors in restrooms, apparently due to a rumor of Bloody Virgin Mary, and even the mundane sound of a tetherball chain could trigger outright terror. These kids became hyper-vigilant, sort of hovering near classrooms at recess, playing only in small groups with designated lookouts, and carefully avoiding what they called evil areas of the playground. Nightmares repeated the shooting, causing such anxiety that they too would die, that some even tried to sleep with their eyes open. Just awful.
It is awful. And what's truly fascinating here from a clinical perspective is how these intense reactions are, textbook symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Dr. Spencer Eath, who's a child psychiatrist specializing in PTSD, describes its core as the intrusive memory of the central violent action. And these aren't just fleeting thoughts. They are intense, full sensory perceptual experiences, the sight, sound, even the smell, of gunfire, screams, blood, sirens. Neuroscientists now understand these vivid, terrifying moments become memories basically emblazoned in the emotional circuitry, specifically due to an over-aroused amygdala, that small almond-shaped part of our brain that acts as our fear center, our alarm system.
Right.
They essentially become mental hair triggers, ready to sound an alarm at the slightest hint of danger.
And this hair trigger thing isn't exclusive to mass shootings, right? I mean, that's an extreme example.
Right. Not at all. No. Any deeply traumatizing event, a fire, a bad car accident, a natural disaster, even a mugging can implant these trigger memories. But our sources point out a really crucial distinction. Violent acts are often more insidious, more damaging psychologically than natural catastrophes.
Why is that?
Well, because victims feel intentionally targeted. It shatters those fundamental assumptions we all have about trustworthiness and safety in the interpersonal world. It feels personal.
That makes sense. It's not just a random event. It's someone doing it to you.
Exactly.
Consider these anecdotes from the sources. A man struck on the back of his head would only feel safe walking directly in front of an old lady.
Specific.
Very specific. Or a woman mugged in an elevator became fearful not just of elevators, but subways and any enclosed space.
Right.
She even apparently ran from her bank once at the sight of a man simply putting his hand in his jacket.
Wow.
It makes you wonder how many times we misinterpret someone's overreaction in daily life, and their amygdala might just be firing on overdrive because of something in their past.
That's a really important point. We rarely know what internal landscape someone else is navigating.
Yeah. And the imprint of horror, as these examples show, can truly last a lifetime. There was a study of Holocaust survivors, even half a century later. It found a third still generally fearful, and nearly 3/4 anxious at reminders like uniforms or barking dogs. 60% thought about the Holocaust daily.
Daily, after 50 years.
Daily. And 8 in 10 who still had active symptoms suffered repeated nightmares. As one survivor put it, if you've been through Auschwitz and you don't have nightmares, then you're not normal.
That quote really hits hard. It speaks to how deeply ingrained it becomes.
It does. And listen to this, the powerful words of a 48-year-old Vietnam veteran, some 24 years after his trauma. I can't get the memories out of my mind. Last night I went to bed, was having a good sleep for a change, when all of a sudden a thunderstorm passed through and there was a bolt of crackling thunder. I awoke instantly, frozen in fear. I am right back in Vietnam.
Oh, man.
I'm sure I'll get hit in the next volley and convinced I will die. My hands are freezing, yet sweat pours from my entire body. Suddenly I see what's left of my buddy Troy on a bamboo platter sent back to our camp by the Viet Cong.
Hmm.
It's just a stark reminder that the fear, the physiological reaction, can be just as vivid decades later.
Absolutely. This powerful re-experiencing really highlights PTSD as a perilous lowering of the neural set point for alarm. The brain's baseline for danger gets shifted, and the more brutal the events, the more indelible the memory tends to be. Dr. Dennis Charney, a psychiatrist at Yale, states pretty bluntly that victims of a devastating trauma may never be the same biologically, whether it's from combat, torture, abuse, or even a single overwhelming event.
Never the same biologically. That's heavy.
It is. But here's a critical insight, connecting this to the bigger picture. The operative word seems to be uncontrollable. This is crucial. Feelings of helplessness, not just the event's severity, seem to be what imprints trauma so deeply.
Okay, so it's the lack of control.
Precisely. If people feel they have some control, even a tiny bit, they tend to fare far better emotionally. This immediately gives us a powerful leverage point for healing. Fostering a sense of control, even a small one, acts almost like a biological antidote to that despair and overwhelm.
That feels really important.
It is, and it was starkly demonstrated in studies with laboratory rats, actually. They gave rats identical shocks, but only the rat that couldn't escape or control the shock, the helpless one, developed those stress-induced brain changes. The one that had some control, even if it still got shocked, didn't show the same changes.
Fascinating. So how does this play out biologically? You said it's a limbic disorder.
Yeah, fundamentally, PTSD is rooted in significant changes to the limbic system, which is our brain's emotional hub. Key changes occur in its circuitry, especially involving the amygdala, that alarm center we mentioned. For instance, the locus coeruleus, it's a brain area that acts like our body's internal alarm bell, regulating adrenaline and noradrenaline becomes hyperreactive. It starts secreting extra large doses of these powerful brain chemicals in response to even minor reminders of the trauma.
So it's overreacting chemically.
Exactly. And our sources highlight that Vietnam vets with PTSD were found to have 40% fewer of the off switches for these stress chemicals, what researchers call catecholamine stopping receptors. This suggests a lasting brain change that basically kept them stuck in a state of high alert.
40% fewer.
Wow.
Yeah.
And another critical change is in the circuit linking the limbic brain with the pituitary gland. This leads to the oversecretion of CRF, which is the brain's main stress hormone. Dr. Charles Nemiroff explains it like this. Too much CRF makes you overreact. So, for example, if you're a Vietnam vet with PTSD and a car backfires in the mall parking lot, it's the triggering of CRF that floods you with the exact same feelings as in the original trauma.
So the body relives it physiologically because of the CRF.
That's right. And people with too much CRF, they don't habituate, they don't get used to it. They react just as strongly to the fourth car backfire or the fourth loud clap as the first. You can imagine how exhausting that constant overreaction must be.
Absolutely draining.
Definitely. And there are also changes in the brain's opioid system. This system normally secretes endorphins to blunt pain, right? In trauma, the system can become hyperactive. And ironically, this might explain symptoms like anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure, and that general emotional numbness people report.
So too many painkillers, in a sense, numbing everything.
Kinda. It's almost like the system is so overwhelmed trying to manage the pain signals that it just shuts down the capacity for positive feeling, too. This can show up as a lack of empathy or even dissociation, where the mind seems to wall off crucial moments of the traumatic event, like a protective blank spot in the memory.
Right, like forgetting key parts.
Exactly. And what's more, some studies suggest that even mild stress in youth can make an individual more susceptible to these trauma-induced brain changes later in life. It's like it primes the amygdala to find danger everywhere.
So what this whole cocktail of brain changes boiled down to is a system just primed for perpetual threat and at the same time a blunted capacity for joy or connection.
That's a good way to put it.
It sounds like the brain literally gets stuck in emergency mode. You know, these neural changes, they offer short-term advantages during dire emergencies, being vigilant, aroused, impervious to pain, all good things when you're in danger.
Right, survival mechanisms.
But they become lasting, debilitating problems, like the source said, a car stuck in perpetual high gear, when the amygdala's set point shifts long-term. This heightened readiness means ordinary life can feel like an emergency, and innocent moments can trigger this explosion of fear. So, given this powerful, almost overwhelming grip of trauma on the brain, the obvious and I guess the most hopeful question is, can it heal? Is there a way to reset that hair trigger and help people move forward?
Well, the good news is, yes, even PTSD can lift. While these traumatic memories do interfere with spontaneous emotional relearning, the brain changes are not indelible. They can be rewired.
Okay, that's huge. Not indelible.
It is huge. Dr. Charney suggests that recovery involves a cortical process. That means the prefrontal cortex, our brain's executive decision maker, the control center, actively suppresses the amygdala's fear response. It learns to manage it. And Richard Davidson, a psychologist at the University of Wisconsin, found evidence for this. People with more activity in their left prefrontal cortex got over learned fear more quickly.
Left prefrontal cortex. Interesting.
Yeah. It means the emotional circuitry can absolutely be re-educated. The key message here for you, the listener, is that these aren't just feelings, they're hardwired biological reactions. Understanding this distinction is often the first step towards self-compassion and feeling empowered to seek change.
That's incredibly hopeful. But how does this re-education happen in practice? It's not like you can just, tell your prefrontal cortex, hey, get to work inhibiting the amygdala, right?
Right, if only. Well, one fascinating way it happens, especially in children, is through play. Think about those games we mentioned earlier, like Purdy, or the reenactments by the Chowchilla kidnapping victims, the girls washing their Barbie dolls over and over, or playing traveling Barbie, which always returns safely.
Okay, yeah.
These seemingly simple acts allow children to relive the trauma safely in a low-anxiety context. This starts to desensitize the memory and associate it with non-traumatized responses. It also offers a crucial sense of mastery. Like when children playing Purdy choose to kill the villain in their game, they take control.
Regaining control. There's that word again.
Exactly. This voluntary replay seems to head off the need for damming up those potent memories that might otherwise burst through later as uncontrollable flashbacks.
Makes sense. And beyond play, the sources mention art as a powerful medium for children, too.
Absolutely. Dr. Spencer Eath, for example, treated a 5-year-old boy who had witnessed his mother's murder. The boy was understandably incredibly reluctant to talk about it, so Eath asked him to draw. The drawing was of a race car driver with strikingly large eyes.
Large eyes.
Yeah, which Eath interpreted as representing the boy's own daring in peeking at the killer during the event. The very act of drawing begins the process of mastering the trauma as the child gradually gains control over the narrative and the emotional impact, putting it outside himself.
That's powerful. So what about adults? Play and drawing might work, but how does it look for grown-ups?
Well, for adults, Dr. Judith Lewis Herman, a Harvard psychiatrist, outlines 3 powerful stages of recovery from trauma. And these stages have a clear biological logic that reflects how the emotional brain actually relearns and re-engages.
Yeah, what are they?
First stage, attaining a sense of safety. This is all about calming those overly triggered emotional circuits we talked about. Just understanding that jumpiness and nightmares are known PTSD symptoms can actually make them less frightening in themselves. Knowledge is power here. Yeah.
Right, knowing it's the PTSD, not you going crazy.
Precisely. And this stage crucially involves regaining a sense of control, which directly helps unlearn the helplessness that initially overwhelmed the brain during the trauma. Our sources give the example of Irene, a patient who suffered an attempted rape and subsequent stalking. She regained safety by actively enlisting friends and police intervention, taking action.
Taking control.
Yes. Medications and relaxation techniques can also play a role here, helping restore physiological calm. This allows the brutalized emotional circuitry to rediscover that life isn't a constant threat. It's basically about resetting that internal alarm system.
Okay, safety first. What's next?
Second stage, remembering the details and mourning the loss. Once a foundation of safety is established, the patient begins to retell and reconstruct the trauma story. The pace here is really critical. It often mimics the natural inner clock of spontaneous recovery, where those intrusive memories alternate with periods of respite. You don't flood the system.
Right, titration almost.
Exactly. By putting sensory details, feelings, and reactions into words, the memory is brought more under the control of the neocortex, our thinking brain, making it more manageable. Reliving the events in a safe, secure, therapeutic setting helps the emotional circuitry learn that security can coexist with trauma memories. They aren't mutually exclusive anymore.
Like the little boy drawing.
Just like the boy drawing his trauma and slowly recounting it, that's trauma mastery in action. As he did that, his nightmares receded. It's about integrating the memory without constantly being overwhelmed by it.
Okay, safety, then remembering and mourning. What's the third stage?
And third, reestablishing a normal life. This final stage involves mourning the profound losses the trauma brought, maybe a physical injury, the death of a loved one, or that shattering of trust we discussed. This mourning process allows for letting go of the trauma's pervasive grip so patients can look ahead, hope again, and start to rebuild. The goal isn't necessarily to forget, but to no longer have trauma memories erupt uncontrollably, to be able to revisit them voluntarily if needed, and crucially, to put them aside like any other memory.
To integrate them into the larger life story.
Exactly. It's about rebuilding trusting relationships, finding meaning. Again, these are all vital markers of success in re-educating the emotional brain to feel safe and connected in the world.
So this framework, these insights, they're not just for severe catastrophic trauma, are they? Can this apply to the, let's say, everyday emotional challenges many of us face? The ones that might not be diagnosable PTSD, but still leave their mark?
Oh, absolutely. That's a key takeaway. While catastrophic traumas are thankfully rare for most people, the same underlying circuitry that imprints these bold, vivid memories is at work in life's quieter, yet still impactful moments. Think about things like chronic neglect or rejection in childhood. They might not reach the fever pitch of, say, combat or a natural disaster, but they leave their own distinct imprints on the emotional brain. One source calls these muted emotional scars. They often manifest in relationship difficulties, anxiety, low self-worth later in life, stuff many people struggle with.
Muted emotional scars. I like that term.
Yeah. And the beautiful insight here is that if even severe PTSD can be healed, then so too can these more subtle, yet often pervasive scars. The potential for change is there.
So bringing all of this together,
Yeah.
how does this rich understanding of trauma, healing, these brain circuits, how does it connect with the broader concept of emotional intelligence? Feels like there's a direct line.
There absolutely is. Psychotherapy, in this context, can be seen as a kind of emotional tutorial. It's re-education for the emotional brain. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux, the researcher who really put the amygdala's hair trigger role on the map, he suggests that once your emotional system learns something, it seems you never let it go.
Okay, that sounds a bit discouraging at first.
Wait for it. He continues, what therapy does is teach you to control it. It teaches your neocortex how to inhibit your amygdala.
Ah, there it is, control again.
Right. The propensity to act on the emotion is suppressed, while the basic feeling might still remain, but in a much more subdued form. It's not about erasing the memory or the initial feeling, but fundamentally changing its power over you.
So the feeling might still flicker, but the reaction changes.
Exactly. What changes over the course of therapy, or even just through conscious effort and self-awareness, isn't necessarily the initial twinge or sensitivity that triggers an emotional reaction. Studies by Lester Laborsky show that while the underlying wish or fear may not disappear entirely, the emotional reaction to triggering events becomes less distressing, and the overt responses become more effective and adaptive.
Okay, that makes sense.
So in brain terms, the limbic circuitry might still send out those initial alarm signals, but the prefrontal cortex learns a new, healthier, more considered response. It's about building new neural pathways, strengthening those inhibitory connections, not just trying to delete the old ones, which, as Ledoux suggested, might be impossible anyway.
So it really is about shifting our response rather than trying to eliminate the initial feeling altogether. That feels like a really powerful and practical distinction.
It is.
It suggests that maybe a quicker recovery time from emotional upsets or a greater ability to manage that initial surge of feeling.
Yeah.
That might be a true mark of emotional maturity, a key emotional intelligence skill.
Precisely. You've got it. This entire deep dive, really, it underlines a fundamental truth. Emotional learning is lifelong. The emotional brain can always be reshaped. There's always potential for growth and change.
We've journeyed through the profound emotional aftermath of trauma, haven't we? From those indelible imprints on the amygdala to the, frankly, incredible resilience and capacity for relearning in our emotional circuitry. We've seen how emotional relearning, whether it happens through children's play, the expressive power of art, or those structured therapeutic stages, offers a powerful path to healing and regaining a deep sense of control and safety. And this deep dive has shown us that even the most deeply implanted habits of the heart learned way back in childhood, those muted emotional scars, they can be reshaped. Understanding the brain's incredible capacity for emotional relearning isn't just about major trauma recovery. It's really about empowering your own path of growth and resilience in navigating all of life's challenges, big and small. So how might recognizing that your emotional responses are, in part, a form of learned behavior? How might that change how you approach your own emotional well-being and growth? Something to think about. We invite you to reflect on that.